as you know, today we are talking and hearing from the wonderful Megan Edwards on keys to creating content that aligns with your business. Megan is an incredible LinkedIn content marketing specialist. She is a virtual LinkedIn consultant and content strategy consultant. I've also been very lucky to see her present at our Victory Lounge before, and I know firsthand how much of an incredible speaker she is. So thank you so much for joining us today. She helps businesses of all sizes build a LinkedIn presence to support their business goals with a key focus on growing brand awareness, lead generation, and authority. Now, a couple of the key topics that we will be covering tonight are keys to creating content that aligns with your business, what content should I write, how often should I publish, and will I run out of content, and what if no one likes it? You know, that terrible thought when we all want to press publish, but we're plagued with this idea of not being popular enough. So Megan, once again, thank you so much for joining us. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Okay, this is amazing. I'm so excited to see that this many people have joined us for a subject that is very close to my heart. Anyone that knows me well knows that I've been a writer all my career, and anything to do with content I will talk about until you tell me to shut up. So, but I'm very grateful for your attention, and we will jump straight into it. So, as Kate mentioned, I spend a large amount of time on LinkedIn, and it comes down to it simply being the tool of the day as far as communication tools go. But everything I'm going to be talking about for content applies to LinkedIn, but it applies to every part of your marketing. It's not that it's exclusive in any way. So keep that in mind. You can apply these ideas and these strategies to every part of your content, your website, etc. All right, let's jump into it. So I guess we have to start at the beginning. I mean, why create content in the current business climate? And I'm not just talking COVID-19, but as a marketing tool. Content really has evolved massively, and we tend to, as business owners and as professionals, we tend to see it purely from a functional point of view and a marketing point of view, which intellectually we know makes sense, but emotionally often leads us to get disengaged from the content creation process. So that's really something that I want to focus on during this afternoon session, because I think the more unemotional and disengaged we get from how we feel about things, it flows through. It shows up in your content. And the last thing you want is for people to be able to sense that. We've all been on the receiving end of consuming something that has no emotion in it. We know how that feels. Okay, so let's have a look. From a commercial perspective, it's no surprise we all have very similar objectives, and I'll often ask people during a session like this, well, what is your primary purpose for creating content? Is it around awareness, leads, thought leadership, authority? It usually falls into maybe all of those things, but I would encourage you to focus in on at least, or primarily on one each time you create something, because it does give you that focus. Otherwise, you are trying to create something that solves multiple problems, and you end up solving none of them. So, and obviously from your audience's perspective, they really don't care about that part of the process. From their perspective, they want the two things. They want education, they want entertainment. Our goal as content creators, not just as marketers, but as content creators, is to combine those two. How amazing would that be if you could combine both of them and have a commercial outcome at the same time? Personally, I think that would be pretty cool. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. And let's start from the very beginning. Okay, this is not going to be a long-winded fairy tale. It's very much about understanding from a physical or neurological perspective how ideas are formed, because if we understand that aspect of things, we then understand how we can not only work with it and align with it, but recognize the warning signs when we are starting to stray from the creative zone, if you like. So let's have a look. It comes down to, are you catching the right wave, the right brainwave more specifically? Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with different states or different waves, brainwave styles. But when you look at it from a creative perspective, normally creative, we like to think that when we're solving problems, we are being creative, okay? We almost always are fairly and squarely in the middle of what's known as beta, which is our problem solving state. It's the state that senior executives, business owners, marketers, we all get into when we are faced with a problem, a challenge. You know, we're looking to get more leads, whatever it happens to be. And we tend to slide into this state of problem solving. We know we want a particular objective and we have a service or a product that we think can link to that. So logically, you would think, well, that's a good state to be in when it comes to content creation. And look, it serves us to a point, but you reach almost a neurological burnout in a way, and you limit yourself. It's like wearing blinkers. If you spend too long in that problem solving mode, that beta state, then it leads to becoming detached from your purpose or your message, which if you stand up and you say you're passionate about your business, that's the last thing you want. It leads to less emotion. And if we're, as I said at the beginning, if we're disengaged emotionally, that flows through in the language that you use, in the other content that you create. It makes you work harder, okay? And that's why you end up being less efficient. So you're ultimately giving yourself a creative lobotomy in the process.
Megan, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We just can't see your presentation, unfortunately.
Okay. Let's have a look. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
No worries. Did you have it from the beginning?
No, we didn't.
Okay. No, it's all right. Oh, good. All right. So, yeah, you end up in this place of lots of effort and not a lot of new ideas coming up because you keep looping back. You're looking at your goal, leads, for example. You're looking at how you think you're going to get there, the product or service, and it becomes a vicious circle. So, which does not help your creativity at all. On the other hand, I mean, I could talk about neuroscience all day from a creative perspective, and that's clearly not why we're here. But I want you to think about it when it comes to connecting your content to your business goals, okay? Think of your content like a flight simulator, okay? Now, if you've ever watched a movie or maybe you've been lucky enough to participate in a flight simulator, you understand that it's very immersive. And it gives people the sense that they're there. Well, that is ultimately what your content is aiming to achieve if you come from that creative place, okay? You want them to have the full feeling of what it would be like to work with you, to go through the process, to get to the end goal, whatever it is that they're looking to achieve, because that's the only way that they can step into a relationship with you with confidence that you're going to meet their needs. All right. Okay. Now, there was a study done in the US not that long ago, which looked at storytelling, and why, again, from a technical perspective, not just because marketers say storytelling is the thing to do, but to understand why it's so compelling. And when they surveyed a group of students, they looked at one single piece of text or one story, and they asked one group to write it in a storytelling style, like a children's book. They asked the other group to write it in a documentary style, purely factual, same core information, but the documentary version produced very little change in mood or emotion. And what they realised was that people who read the story version were more likely to take on the suggestions that people presented them with after they'd consumed that piece of content. Now, that alone, I think, is pretty compelling reason to approach things from a storytelling perspective. Okay. From a business process perspective, though, just to satisfy that part of what we're doing today, think of it just as like it's a 1, 2, 3. Okay. You start by defining what it is that you're trying to achieve. Now, we're not going to stray back into that problem solving space, but we're going to get very clear about what it is that what our outcome is, what we've got to work with, who we're trying to work with, and maybe where the gaps are there. And more specifically, have a think about where you get your information from. How do you understand who it is that you're addressing? How do you phrase it in the right kind of way? And the best place, people often say when I ask that question, is, well, I'll jump onto Google. I'll look at where I appear in the search results. I'll look at where my competitors rank. Maybe their website is SEO managed, but that doesn't really serve you in this case. We know that everybody's working hard on their SEO behind the scenes in their website. From LinkedIn's perspective, the data that you get from there is far more indicative of the performance of content, okay? Whereas Google, you're playing to the people who've paid to be in a certain position, who've optimized, etc. LinkedIn's going to give you a much more authentic perspective of that. So give some thought to really jumping into LinkedIn and having a bit of a poke around. Use it as a research tool to see what is performing well. Do a keyword search on there instead of Google, or start on LinkedIn and search the term. See who comes up. Are they your competitors? Are they people who maybe are your ideal client talking about the subject because they're trying to understand it, or they're trying to find somebody to help them? Okay, so, and you'll start to see as well from a performance perspective who is really getting good traction around those subjects. If they're subjects that you want to be known for, and you see somebody else doing well, I'd be having a really good look at why they're doing well. Is it the style of content that they're doing? Is it the language? Something's going right there, and I'd be looking at those high performers to see what it is. The next step is going to be gathering information about the audience that you're trying to reach. Okay, and that means starting ultimately where they are. And again, if we use LinkedIn as an example, it's starting where they are in your news feed, either publishing their own material or they're engaging in conversations. They're responding to things, they're asking questions. Maybe on their profile, it indicates the sorts of things that they occupy their professional time with. But gather that information so that you can not only understand the what, but the how they communicate. And that sort of thing is very helpful when you then go to write your own content, but even to do something as simple as have a phone conversation, that you can mirror the language that they use and describe the problem from their perspective, not from your perspective. And then the third piece goes back to the neurological side of things. It's very easy for somebody to say, stop thinking about the problem. Yes, particularly if you're not the one who's trying to make a sale and, address the bottom line. And I fully appreciate that as a business owner myself. But again, if we reference those brain states, okay, beta only serves you for so long. Okay, you need to let go enough to slide into the kind of state that we find ourselves in when we're exercising, when we're meditating, when we're out in nature, that alpha state. Not because we have to live in perpetual zen, because we know there's things to do and we have to move at a certain pace, but because that makes us most receptive to what's called gamma spikes. Okay, and the gamma spikes are where the new ideas happen. Okay, so there is a technical and a business or commercial benefit to letting yourself sink into that let go end of the process. And ultimately, we're not going to do anything unless we've got a really good sense of how we want people to feel. So if we go into things feeling good, not just confident that we have a good offer, but feeling good and positive in the way that we express ourselves, that comes across to them. But we can also be more in control of the emotions that we want to evoke in them. So let's look a little bit at the storytelling idea so that you can apply all of those things we've just discussed in the context of, let's say, a LinkedIn post, for example. As a writer, people will often say it's easy for you to say you're a writer, you do this every day. I can tell you it doesn't get necessarily any easier if you are stuck in your head. But there are a few, I wouldn't say secrets, but practices that will serve you well. So I don't have time to go through all of them, but let's just have a look at a couple. The first is to get your head around the fact that interest will always beat readability, okay? And that's not to say that you can completely disregard grammar, punctuation, spelling, the works, because even if it's not a priority to everybody or to you, it does create an impression, okay? But interest will always trump readability. And there was a study done as part of the Happiness Project, if anybody's familiar with Gretchen Rubin, not that long ago. And it came up as 30 times more. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off if you allow that point to sink in, that you don't have to be perfect about it. You don't have to be like me and have lived your whole career as a writer. The second thing is that your structure, the structure of your content, matters just as much as it did back when you were being asked to write essays or reports at school. Okay, structure is still important because it helps to guide people through the reading process or the consumption process. Okay, I see a lot of content where people just jump straight to the call to action. They have a couple of key things, they name a few features, a few benefits, and all of a sudden I'm at the call to action before they've really tied up the loose ends and given me a sense of satisfaction. And that is worth keeping in mind. Are you leaving people feeling satisfied? Because you know that if you're satisfied, you are more receptive to what comes next. Okay, you're in a state of comfort, essentially. So please don't jump and go straight to a call to action. Make sure that there is a logical flow as a storybook would. Okay. The next little storytelling tactic, I guess you could say, I use a lot if you are familiar with my content, is to really challenge people's brains a bit by bringing up unexpected associations. And to be honest, I don't know where they come from sometimes, but it's very much about just letting yourself be open to whatever comes up. And I think, again, from a neurological perspective, it does make your audience's brain feel a little bit challenged, because from a process perspective, they are trying to search their own minds, their own memory for how to link a couple of particular things. How can I find an association between a unicorn and a book? Okay. So it piques interest. Okay. People want to know, where is she going with this? Okay. Now that, obviously these are a couple of random emojis just to demonstrate my point, but you can really play around with that. And in the process, give yourself permission to stray from the traditional business communication framework. Please stray from the traditional business framework as much as you can, because I can tell you the majority of people won't, for a multitude of reasons, and they all sound the same. Okay, this kind of thing is what distinguishes you in a very heavily commercial business environment, particularly somewhere like LinkedIn. This distinguishes you from everybody around you. It shows your personality. It makes people smile. And we know that those positive emotions flow through. They feel better about you, about your product or your service, your brand. It all has a ripple effect. Okay. The next one that some of you may be familiar with is divergent thinking. Now, again, random example, and I don't think I've ever written a piece of content about 100 uses for a hamburger. So I'm open to suggestions there, but it's really just about, and you've probably seen it in movies, you might have read it in a book. It's really about just saying, okay, we know that A can do X. What else can it do? You know, however far-fetched it might be, because it's in those moments that some of the coolest ideas come out. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be your next new product to market, but it's a different angle perhaps. You know, it's a new way of thinking about things. And again, it helps you step outside the corporate or the commercial box that everybody else is playing safe in, and draws your audience in. Okay. Now, I can appreciate from a commercial perspective that this whole process has to have a degree of efficiency. Okay. Even for somebody who does it all day, every day. Okay. There has to be efficiency. So these are just a couple of things that I would strongly recommend, because I use them myself. And again, they help you get out of your head. They help you do things faster, more intuitively. They help you to get rid of the baggage of, you know, let's tick the marketing box or make sure we mention every feature of our particular product or service. The first one is to use voice. And I'm not talking about making podcasts or videos or anything like that, which is totally fine and something you should be thinking about doing, but use your voice to verbalize your ideas, okay? Because not only will it help you to simply do a brain dump, as you could call it, and put that information down to refer back to, but it allows you to construct your ideas in a conversational way. So I jump on my phone quite often. I just hit record and send a text message to myself or something like that. But you'll often find then that you can transfer those little snippets over to your computer, and you've got the skeleton or the foundation for a piece of content. Even if you know it's going to need some polishing up, it's a starting point. And as I said, it gets you into that conversational way of writing, which we know people naturally feel more comfortable and will lean into more. So pretty simple and really, really valuable. And the second one is to work in series. You know, when a TV show is successful, it's not successful just because of one episode. Okay, they pilot and then they create a series to lead people down a particular path. And it's the same with your stories or your content. Okay, if you have a particular message that you want to convey, break it into bite-sized pieces. Okay, each piece of content, particularly in the context of something like a LinkedIn post, needs to have one key idea per post. Okay, don't cram everything in to each piece of content, trying to cover all your bases. People mistakenly think that they've only got people's attention or their audience's attention for that one opportunity. But you can create interest and you can create curiosity and anticipation if you break it down. But you also are more likely to hold their attention and be remembered for that one idea, rather than, as I said, try to cram too much in and they just go, whoa, too much, I can't hold on to all of that, and you maybe have lost them before they even get to the end of your piece because it feels too much for what they want at that time. And it's also efficient from a time management perspective. You can write, a whole piece and then just break it up into chunks and publish one piece each day, for example. So it serves multiple purposes. And finally, I've done a lot of talking, but obviously we are in a pretty unique situation at the moment. And I've had a lot of people chat to me about what's appropriate to write or to share content-wise at the moment. I think the best way that I can summarize it is by two things. And the first is that you continuing to show up and to be informative and helpful to people by providing useful information is a perennial offer, okay? It doesn't matter what is going on externally. People will still appreciate that, even if they don't necessarily jump up in response under the current situation, okay? So, but it gives them a sense of familiarity and confidence that you are still there and still doing what you do. You haven't suddenly sidestepped into a different area because you're trying to cover your bases, okay? You're doing the same thing. And it also conveys to people that you are mindful that maybe that you're able to pivot. Okay, now that's an expression that's been thrown around a lot lately, but yeah, I leave that one with you because everybody is in a different circumstances. I want to leave you with one thing, and that is simply that. Okay, we're all passionate about what we do. We're going to convey that to the best of our ability in our content. But in the present situation now, more than ever, but always, from my perspective, passion with compassion is always going to be better. Always. Okay? And that will shine through in your content. Okay? And that's it from me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Megan. That was succinct, to the point, and really content rich. So really, really appreciate it. Yes, questions. Does anyone have any questions for Megan? Or is she just too good at her job?
I can always learn, believe me.
Well, it looks like, I don't know, it looks like no one has any questions. So do you have any
I'm
last?
gonna go. Sorry.
Go for it, Wendy.
One of the things is, and yeah, passion, compassion, all of that, I believe absolutely that's on point. And yes, this is around content, but this might air a little bit to the topic of engagement of the LinkedIn tool. I don't think I've ever been spammed as much as I am now. And hey, I think I'm fantastic. 22 other people on this call don't need to think so, but it is a bit crazy, and it's kind of like everybody's trying to sell something, and I get it, revenue at the moment, oxygen is life, and that kind of thing. But I just kind of go, what are the things, what are some of the things that maybe people should be doing less of at the moment with the LinkedIn tool, or how should they be approaching some of these things when they are kind of desperate to create some revenue? Yes,
I think, I think everybody is receiving large numbers of those sorts of things as well, which is, look, it's unfortunate in some ways. But to answer your question, I think, as I said before, we just need to continue to show up as we did before, from that perspective of providing useful information. Okay, that should not have changed at all. And maybe sometimes our language needs to be softened a little bit. I do deeply believe, though, that if you show up and you publish 10 pieces of content and 9 of them are purely education and useful information, that no matter what's going on, that 10th message, which has a marketing or sales angle, is going to be far better received because you've already looked after your audience. Okay, and you've proven that you're not there just for the take. But you do need to go back over the language that you're using and maybe rephrase it to acknowledge where people are at. And that doesn't necessarily mean just jam a few COVID related hashtags into your message, which I see a lot, but acknowledge where people are. Put a question out there or a topic out there and say, I can appreciate you're in this situation of X, if you can say that with some degree of certainty. With that in mind, here's what I would suggest you do. Okay, and I've seen some really good content that does exactly that, particularly around technology related things, video production, other marketing related things where people are showing up and saying, here's how you can do it when you're not in the office with all of that high speed broadband and fantastic equipment. Here's how you do it when you're sitting in your living room. They're the people that get remembered because they haven't tried to keep forcing something that no longer fits. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I have a couple of other questions. Sorry, I spoke too soon earlier. I have a question from Christian. He said, great presentation, Megan.
Thank you.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that businesses make when creating content?
One of the biggest ones is continuity. People get very excited about what they have to talk about, but they don't plan far enough ahead. It's kind of like putting $10,000 in your bank account and planning out a budget of 1 month. Well, what happens on month 2? So your content needs to be thought about quite in advance because that takes the pressure off and allows you to continue to show up consistently. And you can damage your reputation quite significantly if you jump in and post every day, for example, and then you disappear after a few weeks and nobody sees anything from you for a month. So continuity, definitely. And as I said before, the angle of value, and then you can bring in a sales related message. I think that proportion always has to be in play no matter what, so that you are over supplying the useful things, and making people far more willing to receive the sales message when it does come.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I have another question. Actually, I have a couple of questions. We've got 2 more questions and then I think we'll close it up. But I'd love to ask this one from Daryl here. He said, what is the value in sharing others' content whilst also doing your own content?
Okay. Look, I think there are a couple of things there. I mean, to me, it acknowledges that you're aware of what's going on beyond your own backyard, because we can all be a little bit myopic in that respect. And people notice when you show up purely to support somebody else. But also if you can link that to something that you have to say, and make that a very obvious connection. No tenuous random things, but something that's very obviously linked to what you do, for example, or to what's going on. Then I think people appreciate that. But it's always got to be prefaced or introduced by, why am I doing this? Why am I showing it to you when I've plucked it from somewhere else? Otherwise, your audience is left wondering what the heck.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a beautiful thing about LinkedIn is, it's so different from other sites like Instagram or Facebook in that the quality of engagement has to be of a particular standard. It's not just sharing content, it's also commenting on content and engaging with your community but you can't just put 100 smiley face, you know, thumbs up. You actually have to engage. You have to be present and saying something of value. So last question from Adam. He said, are there any books or resources that you can recommend for understanding the brainwave states, and any advice on how to get from beta to alpha state?
Gotcha. Most of my resources have been reading association journal material, you know, the American Psychological Association, for example. So I'm happy to share some links with Kate after the session to point you in that direction. And the advice that I've received anecdotally as well as from the reading has been that it's very much about going into those states where you are less feeling the need to achieve something. Okay, you're allowing yourself to be in the moment. And that tends to be, not always, but it tends to be when you are meditating, exercising, you know, in those moments just before waking up or just before going to sleep. But if you're actively wanting to engage it, then you need to give yourself a few minutes to do those things that slow everything down. The quickest one that I've come across and which I have used very successfully is just to close your eyes. You know, your brain responds to the reduction in external stimuli very well if you give it permission to. So that's something you can do in almost any environment apart from behind the wheel. So I would try that, because unless you are in that alpha state already, the gamma spikes are not going to happen. And so you really have to prime the environment.
Beautiful. Do you have time for one more question? I've just had someone writing. Quickly before you do answer, once again, just letting everyone know, please pop in your name and your LinkedIn link in the chat box. And what I'll do is those who have decided to include that link, I'll send them to everybody so you can all connect after this. As I mentioned at the beginning, you know, this is also a great networking opportunity, not just an opportunity to learn, obviously, from Megan. So last question of the night, Alfred has asked, great insights, Megan. How do you find a balance between short, long posts and video content?
I think you just need to start somewhere, and it may be that you divide it equally in thirds and you rotate through those three until you start to get a sense of what people in your audience respond best to. But I would also say once you get that clear, you'll start to understand which style of communication they prefer rather than just length. On social, we know that people's attention is being pulled in multiple directions. I don't think it's fair to say that they have short attention spans, they have a short interest span. So to make that distinction and just experiment, it's the only way, because there's a lot of aggregate data out there, but unless you put a few runs on the board yourself, you won't know what's going to work best for your material and for the people that you want to consume it.
Beautiful. Well said. Well, thank you once again. Just we'll let everybody know. Once again, my name's Kate O'Connor. I am from Victory Offices. A little bit of a sales pitch. We're currently offering 2 weeks completely free on any of our services, whether that's a virtual. Basically, we do a completely bespoke service if you're looking for an office solution, as I know a lot of people are during, you know, this transition out of COVID, which it looks like, you know, will be happening soon. Thank you so much for sharing your LinkedIn links. I look forward to being in touch via email and on LinkedIn. So Megan, thank you so much. I hope everyone has a lovely night, and I'll look forward to seeing you all online again soon.
Beautiful. Thank you,
Thanks,
Kate.
everybody.
Thanks very much.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Wendy.